In the 1760s, the UK was greatly in debt because of yet another war with France. But, fortunately, King George III had a great solution. Just tax the American colonies, and so they did. Americans found these taxes unjust and unreasonable, so they began protesting. The most notable incident is the Boston Tea Party, which took place in December 1773, and where some American patriots threw nearly 10,000 pounds of tea into the sea. British people feared that the situation in America would go out of control, and so they took control of Massachusetts to keep an eye on the colonies. Ironically, it just angered the colonies even more, so they started arming the local militias to be ready for fighting. British troops tried to stop them by destroying stocks of arms and munition held by the rebels in Concord. However, they got outnumbered and had to flee back to Boston, which soon got surrounded by the American troops. In order to put together a proper army, George Washington was sent to Boston to take command of the newly established Continental Army. Guns and munition were then sent there so the Americans could gain back control of the city. They set the gun on Nauseous Heights. The British, in an exposed position, were forced to abandon the city. The Americans celebrated the first victory of George Washington, and soon after, the Congress asked Thomas Jefferson to write a Declaration of Independence, which came into effect in 1776, the 4th of July. It was treason for the British, who set up troops in Staten Island. The American and British fought in Brooklyn Heights, and soon the Americans were cornered around the East River, but thanks to a fog they were allowed to escape. As they fled, they suffered defeat after defeat. The Americans were forced to retreat all the way down to Pennsylvania. It was a crushing defeat for the American revolutionaries.
As winter came, the morale of Washington's troops got very low, some even leaving the army. The British spread across New Jersey, their defenses were down, and no one expected an attack in winter. George Washington heard of it and decided to lead an attack on Trenton and Princeton in winter. These battles were some much needed victories for the revolutionaries and forced the British to abandon the south of New Jersey. As the Americans tried to convince France to help them, British General Howe captured the American capital Philadelphia. While it was a British victory, it allowed the revolutionaries to defeat the weakened and outnumbered troops of General Burgoyne at the Battle of Bemis Heights. This American victory convinced France to join the war. The British were worried by French troops' presence and decided to abandon Philadelphia in order to consolidate the defenses in New York. But another unexpected American ally joined the war. In June 1779, Spain. Spain provided support in the Midwest and Gulf Coast. So the British changed their strategy and started to attack the South, which was rich and a more British supportive area. They successfully captured the cities of Savannah, Georgia, Charleston, and South Carolina, but were stopped by General Nathanael Greene. At this point, both sides needed the war to end. Great Britain was in great debt, and American armies were facing mutiny. Luckily for the revolutionaries, French troops came in great numbers. The British then decided to abandon Carolina, their plan being to prevent the Americans from using the southern continent as a supply base by reinforcing the troops in Wellington and Yorktown. Soon after, the French and American forces discreetly marched all the way down to Virginia. And laid siege on the army settled in Yorktown. The British army surrendered after a month, and around 7,000 troops were captured. It was such a crushing victory that peace negotiations opened up in Paris.
The resulting treaty, signed in 1783, forced Great Britain to remove its troops from America, recognize U.S. independence, and give up territory up to Mississippi River. In exchange, America had to pay any debts still owed to Britain. Spain got Florida, and France got an economic crisis. George Washington was elected as the first president on April 30, 1789, and voluntarily gave up his power after 2 terms that shaped expectations for any future president.